Hi, I'm Chris Janousek. I'm an assistant research professor at Oregon State University, and I'm going to be talking about our NERRS Science Collaborative project called A Long-Term Perspective on Tidal Wetland Restoration, Vegetation Development, Elevation Capital, and Carbon Sequestration in the oldest projects along the West Coast. Oregon State is partnering with Western Washington University, the Institute for Applied Ecology, and 4 NERRS located on the west coast of the U.S., including South Slough, Tijuana, Elkhorn Slough, and San Francisco Bay. Tidal wetlands are important coastal ecosystems for a variety of reasons. They provide a lot of ecological functions and services of value to humankind, including support for wildlife species and unique biodiversity present in estuaries, protection from coastal storms and wave runup, and their unique capacity for carbon storage and sequestration. Unfortunately, many of the tidal wetlands historically present on U.S. coastlines have been lost due to land conversion, either to agriculture, urban uses, or other reasons. Decades ago, we began to reverse that trend by spending many millions of dollars in restoring tidal wetlands throughout the U.S. However, wetland restoration projects are often not monitored for more than a few years, if they are actually monitored at all. So of these many millions of dollars that have been spent, we can naturally ask, how are these projects developing, especially these older restoration projects? And are these investments eventually leading to wetlands that resemble least disturbed or undisturbed reference wetlands? Our objective in the project is to collect a set of the oldest tidal wetland restoration projects along the U.S. West Coast and evaluate 3 interrelated features: their elevation relative to tides, the development of their vegetation communities, and their capacity for carbon sequestration. And each of these components, vegetation, elevation, and carbon sequestration, are tightly intertwined in tidal wetlands. For example, vegetation will help wetlands accrete sediment, which leads to greater carbon sequestration, as well as increases in the elevation of the wetland itself. For many tidal wetland restoration projects, restoration occurs by a removal of dikes or levees that have been historically placed to remove coastal areas from tidal circulation. So those levees are completely removed or breached. And in so doing, we have a set of hydrologic restorations that lead to a cascade of different ecosystem effects in these wetlands. We see often increases in salinity as the tides now inundate those sites. We see vegetation change, often from freshwater-dominated plants to more brackish or saline-tolerant plants. We see soil accretion and eventually carbon buildup in the soils of these. So our approach in the project is to look at about a dozen project sites, each of which is about 20 years old or older, in 9 estuaries located in the Pacific Northwest and in California. Each of these project sites will be paired with a nearby reference wetland to evaluate how it looks after many decades of development. And our sites range across the climate gradient of the West Coast. So we have sites all the way from the cool, wet region of the Pacific Northwest into the more Mediterranean-dominated ecosystems of California. And as mentioned, we're including 4 NERRS sites in the project: South Slough in Oregon, and San Francisco Bay, Elkhorn Slough, and Tijuana River Estuary in California. In the project, we'll be looking at 3 classes of ecological metrics: elevation, vegetation, and carbon sequestration. And to collect data on these metrics, we'll be using existing data as well as collecting new field data. For elevation, we'll use existing data where available and also measure elevations using RTK GPS, which gives us very accurate and precise vertical elevations. We'll use both aerial imagery as well as field-based methods to look at vegetation composition and diversity in the wetlands. And we'll be conducting radiometric dating of soil cores to look at the rate of vertical change in the wetlands and how much carbon they're accreting over. End user collaboration is a very important component of the project and is really built into all different stages. For example, end users have worked with us in a preliminary workshop as well as offline conversations to help with site selection up and down the coast. And they'll also be assisting us with gathering data and providing interpretation and context for these different sites. We'll be partnering with our NERRS partners for data collection, and we'll be collaborating with existing groups, including the Pacific Northwest Blue Carbon Working Group and a recently established San Francisco Bay Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program. Towards the end of the project, we'll have an end user workshop where we can share data and receive both feedback and provide useful information to our partners. And our data will also help build up the Northeast Pacific Blue Carbon Database, which was funded several years ago by the NERRS Science Collaborative. Some of the anticipated outcomes of our project include a better understanding of the successes or perhaps the failures of individual projects up and down the West Coast, and a regional perspective on the factors that affect elevation change, development of plant communities, and carbon sequestration in these restoration projects. We also hope that through the course of the project, we will help increase collaboration on estuarine and blue carbon science across all the Western states. Thank you.